Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. This session is on processing leavers. My name's Duncan, I'm your host and presenter, and I am joined today by my colleague Alice, who's standing by in the background on Q&A duty. Let's now take a look at what we'll cover in the webinar. So we're going to take you through the process of dealing with an employee's final payment and then running the lever wizard and reporting those details to HMRC. So we've broken down the session today into a section on processing your employee's last payments before leaving, and we'll mention some of the things to consider when you come to do that. Processing leavers using the lever wizard in order to produce their P45 and to record the leave date, and then submitting the lever details to HMRC by including them in your full payment submission, or FPS. And we'll go through a couple of demos taking you through that full process. We'll then move on to some common questions, including processing extra payments for leavers, plus some other top tips to help you manage some of the more common scenarios we come across. And then we'll finish up with a look at the further support available, some of our upcoming webinars, and also how to get further help and contact our support team. So that's what we've got lined up for you. And we're going to start things off by talking about processing a leaver's final payment. So once you know that an employee is leaving and you're preparing to process their final pay, there are a number of points that you should consider. So we've listed these out on the slide. And number one, you would think about, have you included all outstanding payments and deductions? Now, when you're working out the outstanding payments, if the employee is not being paid for a full period because they're leaving in the middle of the month, for example, you will need to work out the manual amount of the payment they are owed, but also think about other pay elements, things like overtime and bonuses that perhaps are usually processed in arrears that might need to be included. And of course, any holiday pay for holiday entitlement they haven't taken. Second thing is, are they receiving a statutory payment? As if they're currently receiving a statutory parental payment, such as SMP, you may be required to pay the outstanding entitlement. And if they're leaving before the end of their maternity pay period, that can be processed as a lump sum. Are you paying the employee early? So will you need to do a separate pay run with an earlier pay date for that employee? Or will you be paying them on their usual pay date? Are they a director, and are they set to the pro rata basis method, in which case they will need their national insurance recalculating? And the last point there, not a pleasant one, but has the employee died? If they have, it does mean that their final payment would not be subject to national insurance. So we have got a guide that walks you through some of these considerations when planning to process the final payments. But when you come to do this, there are some tools within the software that will help you check for certain outstanding items. So you may have noticed this before in the enter payment screen, but we do have a final payment checkbox found towards the bottom right-hand corner. And the main functions of that checkbox are to recalculate directors' national insurance if they're set on the pro rata basis method, as final payments for directors do need the national insurance recalculated on the annual basis. If you pay in cash and there are outstanding rounding amounts, they will be paid out in the final pay. If you accrue holiday fund, that can also be paid out in the final payment by selecting that box, as well as tax refunds that are withheld due to a trade dispute, and certain other outstanding items such as holiday entitlement and statutory payments. So we'll show you a couple of the things that does when we go into the demonstration. So with that in mind, let's take a look at processing some final payments in our demo. So I'm just going to bring these slides down. And for most of the demos today, I will be running a monthly payroll. Now, first of all, I'm going to process a final payment for a leaver who is going to be paid a little bit earlier than they usually would be. So we've agreed to give them their final pay a week earlier than the usual pay date, and we're going to do a separate pay run for them. so that we can record the date they've received the payment as their process date. So this particular employee is going to be paid on the 24th of July. Usually it would be the last day of the month. And it's actually employee number 3 in our list who will be leaving this month and receiving their pay on that pay date. So we're going to enter their final payments. And because they're leaving in the middle of the month, I am going to do that manual adjustment to their salary. So with that employee selected, I'm just going to go into the Enter Payment screen. Now, currently, it's showing me last month's payments. So they get a fixed salary and they quite often work overtime hours. But for this final payment, I've manually calculated how much salary I want to pay them for the days they've worked during this final month. So you can either make an adjustment to the hours or the rate. I'm going to do the adjustment to the hours, and the way that I'm working this out is I'm going to pay them for 13 working days out of a possible 23 in July. I'm going to multiply that by their usual salary, and that will then reduce it accordingly. So that is just one method of calculating a part period salary. You may have a different method according to your company policies. So obviously follow what you would normally do when working out a pro rata amount. We also need to think about other payments that might be due. So is there any outstanding overtime for this employee? So actually I need to pay them 5 hours of overtime. Would there be any holiday pay that they're owed? And I've actually checked and they've taken all the holiday they'd accrued. And just to do some further checks, this is where we would use the checkbox at the bottom of the screen, indicating that this is the employee's final payment. So I'm going to go ahead and tick that now. And as you can see, a message has popped up for this employee, and it's just alerting me that they have an outstanding attachment order. And as they are leaving this employment, we do need to notify the court or creditor. So that's a good reminder. And once I dismiss that message, it then gives me an outline of the next steps. So it's telling me I will need to update the records and then process the leaver details before making the full payment submission. And we'll talk more about the order of how you do things a little bit later on. So these are my employees' final payments. I can see they have got a council tax attachment that's still outstanding. So I'll need to contact the relevant authority and let them know that the employee is leaving. But aside from that, I can close out of Enter Payments. And because I'm running, think of this like a mini pay run for this individual only, I would then complete the other steps of my pay run. So that might include a pension assessment, producing pre-update reports, such as pay slips and payment summaries. And I'm just going to skip ahead to updating the records. And if I run through the update records wizard, you can see that one employee has been updated. And it is just reminding me that we do need to use the leaver wizard before we complete our full payment submission. So we can now see that this employee was last updated on the 24th of July, and that will be their last pay date. Now, I'm also going to run a final pay run for a couple of other employees, but these employees are going to be paid on the usual pay date, which for me will be the 31st of July. So let me set the date to the 31st of July, and I'm going to select the other monthly paid employees. So first one that's leaving is actually employee 1. And just to show you, if I check the employment tab, this employee is set up as a director, and they're a director on the pro rata basis. And this just means that their national insurance is worked out per period based on monthly thresholds. But as this will be their final payment, it does need to be recalculated using an annual calculation. So just with this employee selected for now, I'm going to go into Enter Payments. Now, I do want to give them their full salary for the month. They're actually leaving on the last day of this month. And I would just need to check that I've entered any overtime, bonuses, or any other payments that may be payable to this employee. But actually in this period, it is just the salary I need to pay. Now I'm going to select this checkbox, and it's really important I do this for a director. Once it's selected, it gives me the checklist of the next steps to update records and then run the lever wizard. But it also then tells me that this employee is a director on the pro rata basis, and we should only select that final payment checkbox if they're leaving and this is their final payment. And that is exactly what's happening. So we can close that message. And what you might notice here is that the employee's national insurance has been recalculated based on their annual earnings and the annual thresholds, and they're actually receiving a refund of national insurance that they've paid previously. And that's as a result of the calculation. Looking at the employer's information, the employer is also getting a refund of national insurance, and that is quite common if a director on the pro rata basis is leaving in the first half of the tax year, as often they won't have earned enough cumulatively to have paid as much national insurance as they'd already paid. So that was the final payment for this director. I'm just going to pick out one other employee who's leaving. Now, this is an employee who has started some maternity leave. So if I go into the recording maternity screen, and just click no to view the current details, you'll see that they started the maternity leave back in April, and they've got an entitlement of 39 weeks. Now, if they're leaving, they require a P45 and you won't be paying them in the future. You will need to pay them any remaining SMP entitlement that is due, assuming that they're not going on to work for another employer. Now, if they do work for another employer, their SMP entitlement will stop, but it is their responsibility to inform you of whether that will happen. Now, quite often, the employee on maternity leave will choose to remain employed until the SMP runs out, and after that time, if they were going to leave, they would probably leave. But this employee has decided to leave kind of with immediate effect. So when we go into the enter payment screen to do their final payment, they're only receiving statutory pay, as I don't have a company maternity scheme for them. But currently, they're getting the SMP that's due up to the current pay date. But if I select this box to say this is their final payment, get the checklist of the next steps, but it has now recalculated the SMP and it is paying their full remaining entitlement. If I save these payments, it does offer me a report showing some of these outstanding items. So this would produce a report which would just show that SMP is being paid out in this final pay. Now, if you're unsure whether the remaining SMP should be paid as a lump sum, I'd recommend that you contact HMRC's employer helpline for clarification. And if it is only due up to the leaving date, for example, perhaps they are going on to a new employer and starting work, you can enter a return to work date in order to stop the SMP from calculating the full remaining entitlement. So we've got a couple of other levers in that pay run. And again, just going to complete my monthly payroll in the usual way, so printing the pre-update reports and pay slips. Just going to skip ahead to update the records. And once I've updated for my 31st of July pay date, you can see now that the last updated date is showing the July pay date. It's showing the week earlier for the employee that was being paid earlier as a separate pay run. So that's the first stage, that's processing our final payments. So we do recommend that you use the final payment checkbox when you do this, as it will do the recalculation of the director's NI. It'll work out other outstanding amounts, and it will alert you to things like attachments or anything else you may need to be aware of. Don't forget to adjust the salary if required, and to think about any other outstanding items that you might need to pay. So once you're at the stage where you have updated the records, that is when you would need to think about processing the lever. And timing is everything when it comes to levers. You do need to get things in the right order. So we've already processed the final payment and we've updated records. Our next step is to run the lever wizard, which records the leave date for the employee and allows us to produce the P45. And once that's been done, that is when you would send your full payment submission, as that is how you will notify HMRC that the employee has left. So we're going to take a look at the lever wizard and producing P45s. Now the P45 can either be printed or emailed to employees. It is not possible to upload P45s to the Sage HR online portal in the same way as payslips and P60s. But if you do have the core HR module for Sage HR, you would be able to upload a PDF version of the P45 manually if you wanted to as a document. But keep in mind, once you've terminated the employee in HR, they do lose access to that area of their profile. So let's continue the demo now, and we'll take a look at the lever wizard. So I'm going to start with the employee who was paid slightly earlier, as he has a different leave date to my other levers. So when you come to run the lever wizard, you would start by selecting the employee in the list. You can then either open the employee record and go to the employment tab. And from here, you'll find an option to run the lever wizard. So by clicking lever, that takes you into the lever wizard for that individual. Or other places you can run the lever wizard are from the payroll links. You've got an option to make employee a lever, and also from the employee tasks. So if we go to employee, you'll find the lever wizard from here. And as a quick tip, if you're on the payroll tasks, if you're ever unsure what order to do anything in, if you can't remember when you're supposed to run the lever wizard, if you switch your view, you go to view and change view and switch to the process map, you'll actually see that processing levers has its own step. So after update records, but before the full payment submission. So it might be quite useful if you're new to payroll, just need a reminder of what order to do things. So I'm going to go into the employee record to run the lever wizard for this individual. So on the employment tab, I will click lever. I would click next on the lever wizard, and it will ask me to confirm the leaving date. So the employee's last day of work was Friday the 17th of July in this example. There's a box to indicate if the employee is deceased, which isn't the case for this employee. And then from this drop-down list, you can choose to produce P11 reports for your own records. But the one that you'll need for your employee is the P45 plain paper layout. So select that from the drop-down. You can either print that directly to your printer, or you can click the preview option, which is then going to show you the P45 on screen. So there are three parts to the P45. We've got the employee's copy. So it's going to confirm their leaving date, tax code they were on, the total pay and tax to date. And then you've got parts 2 and 3 that the employee gives to their next employer. And then this information is used by that new employer to set up their employee record. So that's your P45. You can print that out directly onto plain paper. If you wanted to export it as a PDF, you've got an export option. So that's one way you could produce kind of a digital copy if you needed to, if you were planning to perhaps manually upload that to Sage HR. And there is an email option from the preview, but if you've already set your employees up for email documents, so if you send the payslips via email, we do have a specific email layout that you can use to email a P45 to them. And I'll show you that for some of my other levers. So once we've got the P45, we can complete the wizard by clicking Finish. Just getting that reminder about the outstanding attachment order. And you can see there, it's popped the leave date into the employee record for us. And if I close the record, you can see the current status is now showing leaver. So they're processed as a leaver in payroll, which means we won't be able to process any further payments for them. Now, I do have a couple of other employees that are leaving, numbers 1 and 4. So we can see they were last updated on the 31st of July. They're both leaving on the same date. So they're both leaving on the last day of that month. So we're going to run the leaver wizard for both of them at the same time. So once they're selected, if I go to my employee tasks, you can see I have the leaver option from here. I can click onto next and confirm the leaving date, which happens to be the 31st of July. And then from here, I can produce the P45 for plain paper. If I show you the preview of this one, got 6 pages in total. So I've got part 1 for employee 1, and then parts 1, 2, and 3 for employee number 4. So they could be printed out and then handed out to the employee. To complete the wizard, I would click onto Finish, and that has now entered the leaving date. And again, the current status is showing leaver. Now, if you did want to email the P45 to your employee and you've got them set up to email their pay slips, so I'll just show you how you do this on the Analysis tab in the employee record. You've got a section for electronic documents. So if you filled in these settings with an email address and a password, it means you can use the P45 email layout to email the P45 in the same way as you would send a payslip. So the way that you would do this is you would still record the leaving date in the leaver wizard, but instead of producing and printing the P45 from there, you would go into Reports and select the Employee folder. And then if you scroll down, you'll find some P45 reports. And then if you email from Outlook, you would choose this layout. If you email using webmail settings, you would choose the other. So if I choose this one because I use Outlook, I can click onto email. And it's then created an email in my drafts folder. You can see that's the email it's created. It's got the P45 attached. It's got the employee's email address ready to send. When the employee gets this email, can open the attachment and enter their password, same password they use for their pay slips, and then they can view, download, and print their P45 like so. So that is emailing a P45. So we've now completed the leaver wizard. We can see the current status has updated. So just to recap those steps, we can now tick off the first 3 tasks. Final payment's done. We've updated the records. We've ran the leaver wizard. Our next step, which we'll show in the next section, is submitting the FPS. Just a reminder that you can also email P45s using the dedicated email layouts. So we've got one set up to integrate with Outlook. The other one works with SMTP or webmail settings. So enter the leaving date via the leaver wizard, but then run the P45 reports from Reports. And one other option, if you are integrated with Sage HR, is that you can terminate the employee profile in HR by recording the last working day. And when you do that, it will then allow you to import the leaving date to the employee record via the Import Employee Data option. Now, one point just to make with importing the leaving date from HR is that you will need to have updated the final payment before you do this. So if you're used to importing employee data at the start of your pay run for any new starters or change of employee details, when it comes to leavers, if you can see there's a leaver that needs to be imported, you do need to wait until you've processed the final pay and updated records, and then you can import the leaving details and you can print the P45 from the reports option. But if that's something that you want to know more about, do check out the article that we've linked to in the handout. So last task now is to submit the FPS, and this is how we notify HMRC that the employee has left. So nothing special you need to do in order to do this, just run the leaver wizard before you send the FPS, and the leaving details will be automatically included in the submission. And when you see the submission information, you'll actually see that the leaving date appears in the leaver column. Now, as well as notifying HMRC, it is important that you also notify your pension provider if an employee has left and they're in the pension scheme, so that they know that they have ceased employment with you. And the way that you would do that will depend on the process laid out by your specific provider. But we're going to take a look now at how to send the FPS to HMRC. So let's just rejoin our demo. Again, I'm still working with my monthly paid employees. So I've got 3 leavers that have left during this tax month. I haven't yet sent the FPS, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So from my payroll tasks, I can select full payment submission. Now, don't worry about this warning. This just comes up because I'm in a training room. But you can see when you come to do your FPS, you'll see the usual FPS screen. You would then check your details. So these are all saved in your e-submission settings. And then as part of the summary of the information you're sending, if you've got any leavers, you will see the leaving date appear in the leaver column. So I'll be notifying HMRC that 3 of my employees in this period are leaving my employment. So it's just then a case of clicking submit. That will send the FPS to HMRC, and they can then end that employment on their systems as well. So what you can now see is that my last FPS date has now updated with the employee's last pay date. So for most of them, 31st of July. But for the employee who had a separate pay run earlier in the month, the FPS date is showing their earlier pay date. And that is everything dealt with in payroll. I just need to make sure I've let the pension provider know that these employees have now moved on. So simple as that to notify HMRC as part of the full payment submission. So now you know the basics of making an employee a leaver. We're just going to sort of finish off by running through some common scenarios. So some common questions that we get around leavers, just picked out a few here to highlight. And the first one is dealing with an extra payment for a leaver. So if you ran the leaver wizard, you just issued the P45, you then realise that there are extra payments to be made. That can be processed in payroll, but the exact steps that you would follow will depend on when that extra payment will be being made. So if that payment is going to be made in the same period as the period that they left, so the period you've last processed, the way to handle this in payroll would be to either restore a backup or roll back the employee for that last period, reprocess their final payments, but include any extra payment that was due. You can then produce a new P45 and pay slip. So you update records, run the leaver wizard again, re-entering the original leave date, And then to notify HMRC of the additional pay, you would simply send an FPS adjustment. So you treat it almost like a correction if that extra payment is being made in the same period as the last payment the employee received. And more commonly, if it comes to light that a payment is due and you've moved on to a later period, there's a different process you need to follow. So I'm going to demo this one. First of all, you will need to make a note of the leaving date and delete it from the employee record. You then need to change the tax code to 0T on a week one, month one basis. And that means that tax will be paid on all of the extra payment. You would then process the extra payment in the period it's being made to them. And if it's an irregular payment, and you can see the definition of irregular payments in the HMRC guidance, so it includes things like accrued holiday pay or an unexpected bonus, you would need to calculate any national insurance due on the payment using weekly thresholds. So something to keep in mind, if you don't pay your employees weekly, you may need to enter manual national insurance for that extra payment. You would then update the records, re-enter the original leave date into the employee record, and then you would submit the FPS in the usual way in that period the extra payment was made. So let me bring that to life for you by running a quick demo. So I actually have a weekly paid employee who left at the start of July. They received their final pay on the 10th of July, and I've already gone ahead and ran the lever wizard and issued their P45. But it has now come to light that this employee has accrued holiday pay that they need to be paid. So I'm going to process this as an extra payment for that lever. So it's being made in a later period to the last time they were paid. It's actually going to be paid this Friday, the 24th of July. So that's what I'm going to set as my process date. I would then go into the employee record and select the employment tab. I would make a note of this leaving date. So it was originally the 3rd of July. And then once I've noted that, I would delete it. And I would then set their tax code to 0T. And I would tick the box for the week one, month one basis. Now the employee is paid weekly. So the national insurance will be calculated using weekly thresholds. If they were monthly, you need to work out the national insurance manually using weekly thresholds, and you would use the manual NI entry checkbox. So what I can now do is I can go into enter payments for this particular employee. I'm actually going to pay them with a holiday pay payment line. So they're not getting basic pay. This was accrued holiday pay that I owe them, 12 hours of holiday. So I've entered that. It's then calculated the tax due on this 0T tax code. So they're paying tax on this. The payment isn't high enough to be liable to national insurance for the employee, but this is the employee's net pay for their extra payment. So I would produce a pay slip for the employee, just detailing what this extra payment was. Once you've got all of that, you can update the records. And then we would re-enter the original leave date, 3rd of July in this example. And that message was just telling me that that leave date is in an earlier period. It's absolutely fine. That was the date they left. And once that's re-entered, when I send my full payment submission for that weekly period, that will then report the extra payment after leaving for that employee. And it confirms their original leaving date. So that's an extra payment for a leaver made in a later pay period. So you can read more about those scenarios and what's regular and what's irregular following the guide that I've linked to. So just to finish up, a few more common questions just to run through here. So first one, is it possible to hide leavers from my employee list? And the answer is absolutely. You can exclude current year leavers and historical leavers by using your criteria settings. So just to show you what I mean here, I just bring payroll back up. I have a number of leavers in this list. If I wanted to hide them from the list, I can click criteria, top of the screen here. Now I already have historical leavers excluded, but I can also tick the box to exclude current year leavers. And when I do that, you can see they are then removed from the list. But if you need to access the records for any reason, you can always go back into criteria and you can clear that box. So you definitely can hide your leavers from the list. Next question. I forgot to mark an employee as a leaver and I've submitted the FPS. So what do I need to do? Well, pretty simple. Just run the leaver wizard now, and then you can submit an FPS adjustment. And that will then report the leaving details to HMRC. If you'd already moved on to your next pay period after you'd run that leaving wizard, it would automatically include the leaving details in the next FPS. But if you've realized before then, you just need to do an FPS adjustment and that will send through the leaving details without delay. Next question is similar. I processed a leaver, but I forgot to update their final payment. So you've done things in the wrong order. You forgot to update records before running the leaver wizard. So the advice here is to destroy the P45, remove the leaving date from the employee record, which will then reactivate that record. You can then update records for that final payment on the pay date that it's made to them, and then you can run the leaver wizard. And once you've done that, you'll be able to include them in your next FPS with their leaving details. A couple more for you. So I processed a leaver by mistake and I submitted the FPS. What do I need to do? And this one's surprisingly simple. All you would need to do in this scenario is to delete the leaving date from the employee record and then continue using that existing record for the employee. The next time they're included in an FPS with that existing record, will inform HMRC that the employee is still employed by you, so they haven't actually left, so that will keep their employment open on HMRC's records. And last scenario, how can I re-employ a leaver? So basically you treat them in the same way as any other new starter. So take their starter form from them, the P45 or starter checklist, and create a new employee record for them. So it's a separate employment if you're re-employing them, but as a bit of a shortcut, you can copy the personal details from the original employee record, and that should save you time when it comes to setting them up. So you might have seen this in our starters webinar, but just to quickly show you, let's say one of these employees is coming back to work for us. So we can select the existing employee record, and when we come to create a new record for them, either using Employee Wizard or Quick Employee, it asks if you want to re-employ that person. And you can see there it has copied over all of their existing personal details. So a bit of a time saver. You would still need to enter their starter form as you would with any other new starter, but that is a kind of quick way of copying their details if you need to re-employ them. And that's it for our common questions. Hopefully they've been useful to you, and that actually brings us to the end of what we're going to cover in the webinar. But before you go, I do want to run through some of the further support that's available, also give you that final opportunity to ask your questions in the Q&A. So we do have some further webinars coming up this month. So we have a session on Payroll Assistant on Tuesday, the 28th of July, and a session on variance reporting the following day on Wednesday, the 29th. If you missed our new starters webinar, that one is being repeated next month on the 17th of August. If you also deal with HR, you might be interested in our next HR advice session. That's on Thursday, the 6th of August, and it's on employee relations and outspoken times, managing belief and freedom of expression at work. So they're always interesting topics, those ones. You can sign up for them completely free to attend by following the links in your handout. If you do need further help with anything Sage related, do head on to our help centre, sage.co.uk/help, or select any of the help options in your software. From there, you'll be able to search the knowledge base and read our support guides. You can check out the upcoming webinars, but you'll also find contact details for our support team. So if you need to contact them, choose the topic you need help with, look for the Get in Touch link, and we'll give you all the different ways that you can reach out to the team. And finally, I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about a free learning course that you can take on Sage AI Academy. So I've just started this one myself. It's bite-sized sessions, just 10 minutes a day, 30-day course, can get you up to speed with the latest on using AI to improve your business. So you can find out more by following the link that takes you straight to the AI Academy. I would highly recommend that you check that out. Some really useful advice in those sessions. So we are nearly out of time. We're going to keep the webinar open a couple more minutes just so we've got the opportunity to answer your questions. If you'd like a copy of the handouts, don't forget to download those before you leave. We will also send you a recording of today's session, so look out for that in the follow-up email that we'll send you in about an hour's time. And when you do leave us today, we will invite you to take a survey. So it'd be great to know what you thought of today's session. If you wouldn't mind taking a minute to complete that survey, I'd very much appreciate it. So I'm just going to go off camera for a few minutes just to help out with the final questions there. And I will come back to you just before we're ready to wrap up. So I'll speak to you soon. Hello again, everyone. Thank you so much for sending the questions through. I think we've got the answers out to you in the Q&A. And we are pretty much out of time. So I just want to take this final opportunity to thank you for joining us at the webinar today. Please do take a minute to complete the survey when you leave us and look out for your follow-up email arriving later today. It'd be great to see you on some of our other webinars. We'll be scheduling some for August very soon as well. But on behalf of myself and Alice, thanks again for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your week. And we look forward to seeing you on some of our other webinars in the future. But it's goodbye for now.